is Dragon Videos. I hope y'all are doing well. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm going to go over some of the most relatable characters in the cartoon world. When it comes to cartoons, we'd always think of them as silly and childish, something that would be just happy entertainment. But as the years go on, we definitely see of how most cartoons nowadays take on a more adult tone, tackle the mature themes, as well as creating characters that have some relatability to what we're going through in our daily lives. So, for this list, I'm going to go over some of the top 10 cartoon characters that we find ourselves relating to the most. Now, bear in mind, I may come across some Disney characters on this list, but I'm not going to dabble it into it too much because that's a So, without further ado, let's begin. I know it's pretty weird starting this list with horse, of all things, but think about horse's situation. You may have encountered a strange land and find yourself not getting anywhere with the people that you're surrounding yourself with. They have different thoughts and feelings and different outcomes that you can't understand. And of course, you want to head back home. And on top of that, if you're a pet owner and you get very upset at wanting to see the thought of never seeing your pet again, yeah, this is exactly the thought process that Horse had to deal with throughout season one. The constant worry and anxiety of being back home in a place where she felt like she belonged, because she was practically a sore thumb throughout the entire Centaur world. It wasn't until halfway through season two is when she learned that her rest of the herd have been going through struggles just as bad as hers. So, in a lot of ways, they definitely had a lot in common, more than she gave them credit for. I'm pretty sure it could have been better in season 2, but I thought of throwing her as being relatable because her struggle in a foreign land is definitely a bit similar to how we deal with new situations and trying to adapt to them. So, while Finn seems to have a time of his life going on crazy adventures with his magical talking dog that stretches always, there is some issues he does come across with that does make him relatable. For one thing, and probably the most important, is his struggle with dealing with the fact that he's the only human in existence in the land of Oo. While it may not bother him too much earlier in the series, it definitely is mentioned once in a while of how he just feels a bit alone, wanting nothing more than to find someone he can relate to. I mean, this is similar to that of Horse, granted, but somehow Finn just takes it on another level than Horse does. He's empathetic and has gone through some more personal losses than Horse has. He lost his own sword that was a reflection of him, as well as struck out with many love interests as much as possible. Which does make us feel a little bad for him because he wasn't exactly a gentleman, but he seemed kind and caring enough where some girls are lucky to have that sense of empathy. And overall, that loneliness is just some of the reasons why he's so relatable. In all honesty, I didn't really finish season 1 or 2 of Dead End Paranormal Park, but I did watch enough episodes to kind of get the gist of the situation that Barney is struggling with. He is a transgender going from female to male and is forced to live alone because he just couldn't handle being under the same roof as his parents, who, while at the same time they weren't giving him a hard time for being trans, apparently his Gram was a different story. In the nightmare vision, we just see him being verbally abused by this woman, and apparently the parents aren't backing him up or defending him. So, of course, it's no wonder that he wants to leave. He doesn't want to be in a semi toxic relationship with his family and he has to go somewhere else. Anyone who's probably been in a similar situation would find themselves relating to Barney, not only in terms of being trans, but also just trying to find an environment where they could actually be themselves and not having to feel ashamed of existing. But I feel like there are some characters who have a way bigger struggle than Barney does. But make no mistake, being someone who is surrounded by family members or people who don't approve of the LGBTQ community can be difficult. Yeah, with Charlie, I'm pretty sure some people are surprised I put her on this list, but I feel like in some ways she is relatable. In the beginning of our lives, we come off as very cheery and optimistic, seeing everything as sunshines and rainbows, especially if we've seen some Disney films. However, as we get older and expose more to the real world and interact with other people, we find that it's more complicated and a bit frustrated. In some cases, we're faced off with people who say, oh, you can't do this, or oh, you can't do that. It's impossible. Just give up. And Charlie never gives up on what her ideals are, which definitely makes her a bit admirable because she's not a total hypocrite about it. The one problem is that with her, her optimism can get her into a lot of trouble, in more ways than one. And of course, one of the things that make us relatable to her is the fact that we do have good intentions. It's just sometimes they don't always work out in the way that we hoped, or sometimes it just hurts us in the end of the day, which actually happened to her in episode 7 of Hazbin Hotel. But make no mistake, Charlie definitely is someone whose struggles are a little similar to that of ours. It just has to take some time to put into context, which is why I put her earlier on this list. So, when you hear the words green eggs and ham, you're probably thinking of a Dr. Seuss book about this little guy named Sam I Am who chases this random person around in hopes that he would try green eggs and ham, which results in some form of peer pressure. However, in the Netflix series Green Eggs and Ham, it definitely takes on a more positive theme about trying new things in a way that is a bit healthy. And then, of course, Sam I Am encounters our unfortunate and relatable cartoon character on this list, Guy Am I. Guy is a well meaning inventor. He wants to just try to bring change to the world around him. However, his inventions explode in his face, both figuratively and literally. As a result, no matter what he tried, he was basically ready to give up his dream and practically become a paint watcher because he felt like he would never succeed in anything in life, not even win a girl. That is until Sam I Am comes in, but weird things began happening each time. So, in a lot of ways, many of us can relate to Guy Am I in that show, mostly because there are times where we've come across situations where things don't work out in the way that we'd hoped, and sometimes they just happen very frequently, up to the point where it gets harder and harder to think positively or even try new things because it might wind up breaking our hearts at the end of the day. And if I were to pair up Lewis from Meet the Robinsons with Sir Pentious from Hazbin Hotel and have them sit down in the same room as Guy and I swear these three are going to talk about inventions and trying and failing. Cause oh boy, would they have a picnic to tell. Now, I'm pretty sure it's shocking we'd find ourselves relatable to someone like Blitz, considering of how loudmouthed and rude he can be. But when you learn about his past and the current struggles that happen in the world of Hell of a Boss, you can definitely find yourself feeling some relation to him. Blitz struggles day in and day out trying to make a daily living like the rest of us do. And on top of that, he's dealing with a lot of emotional distress. The way he handles it is not very healthy, but in some ways, it does show some concept of we all have had struggles, we all have had issues of dealing with our demons, and sometimes we are guilty of suffering some self loathing at the end of the day. And he tries his best to make it fair for everyone, as well as just trying his best to move forward with his life, trying to put his past behind him. We're all guilty of that, so I feel like that's why Blitz is just such a relatable character. I mean, Drew, he still does very questionable things, and some of the stuff he does get him morally in trouble and may cause more issues. But it's just the fact that he acts like a regular person despite being an imp definitely makes us feel some sympathy for this character. Can you imagine a 12-year-old kid with the power to control all four elements air, water, fire, earth, and then, of course, has to save the entire world from a psychopathic fire lord? Yeah, that's basically Aang in a nutshell. He's 12 years old, still a kid, and of course, he's being tasked with something that an adult should be doing. But since he's the Avatar, the one person that can bring balance into the world, he struggles with that sense of responsibility. This overwhelming concept and the pressure that comes with it. Everyone's life practically depends on him. And on top of living with the guilt of never being there for his tribe, his nomads, it definitely is affecting his mental state and his self confidence. He struggles with each of the elements in a certain way, but it's usually the emotional tasks that he suffers with the most. Learning to let go of the past, managing to control all the elements, and dealing with the expectations that is shoved into him on a daily basis. What makes him relatable is that we're also suffering that kind of pressure. I mean, not on the same level as he did, but it definitely gives you that sense of how do I move on? How do I deal with this pain? And as well as how do I fulfill the expectations of others, make them happy so I can be happy? It's not technically a selfish thing to think about. It's just more of you're trying to take care of others as well as yourself. And sometimes when it's too much, it can be very distractive or disruptive. In this case, Aang just cares a little too much, and he's trying to find a way to handle the situation he's in without compromising his morals to boot. Yeah, that's a lot right now for Aang. Now, Steven Universe definitely has something a little similar to that of Aang, dealing with the pressure that he's not his mom, as well as dealing with the fact he has to learn how to control his gem powers, learning about his mom's past, and on top of that, trying to save the world from an alien empire. So, yeah, no pressure. On top of that, he also has to learn of how to socially interact with others. And in lots of ways, Stephen is relatable. There are some people who struggle with the secrets from other relatives or just learning into the expectations of others, and sometimes being so selfless up to the point where it becomes almost toxic. We don't see that in Steven Universe at the tail end of a series, but when we get to Steven Universe Future, you could definitely see the trauma that Stephen has been through that's finally hit hard. And a lot of some of us have been through the same kind of trauma. I mean, not in terms of going into outer space or having to save the world, but dealing with this concept of like, oh my god, I almost died, or I've been in a dangerous situation that will haunt me forever. I mean, that sort of stuff is very hard to move on, especially when you are a young kid trying to process everything. And he was 13, 14, during the time when the series began. So for him, a young kid, having to process all that information in one blow after one dangerous situation after another, it makes you feel so bad for him. And there are some things that can be a little difficult for even us to process at times, and doing so in a healthy way where it doesn't become Now, there are a lot of gifts and abilities people have. Some that take a long time to really spruce up every once in a while, and sometimes it's hard to really be improving yourself if you're always struggling to meet the expectations of others, as I said in previous videos. Callum feels like he fits that bill for most of us who struggle with our gifts and abilities, knowing that we can do very well in one skill set, but yet we struggle in others, basically using more weaknesses than our strengths. And of course, this results in Callum hating himself, feeling like he can't do well in anything if he can't even be a successful prince. Magic was his only ideal key, the one thing that makes him feel valuable because he understands it. It just clicks naturally with him. But of course, Soren at the beginning of the series gave him a very hard time about almost everything. And of course, there are some people in the court who also give Callum a hard time. It's not very present, but from the way he talks about himself, you could definitely see where Callum could be coming from. And not only that, but he also has to deal with his darker self. Basically, we are guilty of struggling with the dark sides of our personality and the consequences that can come with it. In Callum's case, dark magic is that representation of our darker selves, that thing we try to suppress or even fight back on before it consumes us. And this is definitely something that Callum is probably still struggling as of right now, especially when season 6 of The Dragon gets rolling around. All I can say is hang on, Callum. Zuko was by far the most relatable cartoon character in existence. True, we haven't lived the high life of a prince as he did, but his struggle was superhuman. I mean, he went as far as to travel all corners of the globe just to figure out who he is. He had to come to terms with his trauma, learning to accept what his father had done to him was by far very cruel and heartless, and that the ways that he was raised under in terms of a Fire Nation were flat out wrong, and that he finally sees, after traveling for so long, the sadistic monsters that his people have become. And because of that, he also had to turn against his father in order to save his nation from its own destruction. Zuko, of course, had to reflect on those actions and struggle for a bit with his sense of identity, who he is, as well as come to the terms that he never lost his honor in the first place. It's just he had to have a step back and get in touch with reality a bit more, which probably makes him a more endearing character, all the same relatable. He definitely knows what we're going through, not in the physical sense, but the way that he's written definitely gives off that moment of, I can relate to this. I can relate in struggling to find my identity. I can relate in trying to figure out who I am in life. And I'm pretty sure that will still happen as we continue watching Zuko in terms of rewatching it over and over and appreciate the arc that he's gone through to make him one of the most memorable characters of Avatar to this day. So, those are just my thoughts, and I'd like to hear yours. Which cartoon character was the most relatable to you? What circumstance? Do a like, subscribe, and comment down below. This is Dragon Videos signing off.